My name is Sarah Dixon Bornan, and this is my final presentation of my overall finished F&P project. Here we start in my Google Drive where the whole F&P is, and we can go straight into the F&P folder. Below we see that there's the link to my Wix website, which we'll come to later. Here we can see I have folders for every stage of the production, from context, paperwork, footage, research, problem solving, evaluations, feedback, reflective journal, and also my checklists. I'm going to open the checklist first so we can see the work of which I had to do. Here we can see that I have highlighted each section as it is now done. So as we start looking at the work, we're going to start with the context, which was to include a UAL proposal, one-page proposal, schedule, pitch, and script. Going back and going into the context folder, we can see that I have all of these plus some other pieces of context, work and research that I thought was necessary, such as a character biography. First, we're going to look at my drafts for my UAL proposal. I have 3 of these in 3 separate documents. As we can see, when it first started, I had a brief idea of what I wanted my project to be, but my draft was nowhere near good enough to be my final proposal for this project. As this development of my proposal continued, I finally came about my final UAL proposal. For me, coming into this, I had an idea of what I was going to do, so it wasn't too difficult to eventually get my idea down into words. In this proposal, we can see that I do briefly touch on target audience, as I've done an initial piece of research into it, which we see in my pitch. I talk about this more in my pitch presentation video, which is within this folder. I speak about what I've done in the year and the way it will help me with this final project. I also have some of the research I will be doing and the links to it. Below we see my final schedule, which is a separate document within the context folder, which I have put into the bottom of this proposal. Here we can see it shows my plans for when the proposal and all contextual research is due, and I've added the assessment dates in. This is all to help me keep track of my shooting and my time management. We see that same schedule here. I referred back to it frequently throughout my project and it was really useful. My F&P pitch presentation that I spoke of earlier, my one-page proposal, which is just a shortened version of my UAL proposal. This is useful as it helps me look at my work as a professional piece rather than a project. I talk about my project, the art, in third person rather than my own, which is really useful for audiences as well, that helps them get an idea of the project and its plans and intentions. Finally, within the context folder we have my script. I used a Google program called UMeScript to do this, as it helped me format my script and font to an extremely professional standard. It was really easy for me to use, and it's great because I did not need separate documents to show my development. Using the folders along the side, you can go back and see the developments that have been made, the notes made, and overall my script was just 3 pages, but of course my film was not necessarily short. It's just because my film does not have a lot of dialogue in it, only about 2 paragraphs, otherwise it's mainly just stage directions of what's happening, as I really wanted my final film to focus heavily on visuals and cinematography and less on the communication between characters, as I wanted to visually represent art and emotion. Looking back on the checklist, the next stage was research. For my research, this is all within the research report. Here we can see I have separate folders such as my competition folder, primary research folder, secondary research folder, and visual research folder. If I just open the primary research folder briefly, we can see I have my flowchart, otherwise known as a work chart, which is a piece of research that I completed, that I analysed in my research report. I have my audition tapes, questionnaires, and tutor feedback. Here we have, for example, the drama responses and the drama questionnaire, which I did using Google Surveys. If we go back, we can look more into my research report. Similar to the primary research, within these folders is the research for each section. However, I thought it would be best to put it all into one report so it's easier to mark and also easier for me to analyse and compare to each other. At some points, the primary research and visual research cross over and there are many links back and forth, and this would be the easiest way to show that for me. Here we can see I started with my name and the title of my project, L'œuvre d'art, which translates to the artwork in French, as my protagonist is from a French background. Here it says use the research mind map to guide you through the process. If we go back to my F&P folder, we can see that within the checklist folder, there is also a mind map folder. Within this mind map folder, there is mind maps for each stage of the project, each major stage, such as the evaluations, presentations, problem solving, and research. I use these to make sure I critically and analysed and reflected back on to the work that I did and made sure to make all the correct links to ensure my work is as developed as it needs to be. If we scroll down, we can see here we have a checklist similar to the one from before but in more detail for each stage. Underneath the primary research we have the techniques, secondary techniques, and the visual research that I need to do. Also, this includes production research and evaluation and audience feedback after my project was complete. And of course a bibliography, which is at the end of this section. Here I talk about context, which I've already been through. And once again, here's the workflow chart example with some analysis as to how I will create my own, and then my own workflow chart that I made. Beneath this, we can see here I talk about why and how I've conducted the research. I used this technique at some points throughout this research report, or in place of it, I did a SWOT analysis, which targeted the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats within each section of research. I found this was an easy way to show how my research had developed and informed my project. Here we start with the primary research techniques, the surveys and questionnaires, and the response it's given me and what I've learned from it. Continue this down until I have, my final thoughts, which I go into more at the end of this section. Then I look into my actors and my contact with them. Here I decided to use Mandy. These are some of the people who had auditioned and expressed interest in my role and some of the messages that I had for them. Here I talk about narrowing down my audience and how I audition them online rather than in person. And here's the audition process with their self-tapes and the actress that I ended up choosing, which is written here. In the end, I had to change my actress as she let me down constantly throughout this project and ended up using a drama student instead, but I will talk about that more later within my problem solving log. As we can see here, I talk about the SWOT analysis that I was mentioning earlier and how overall the primary research helped my project. Here we can see I start my secondary research, and here there are a lot of side comments within this report. Obviously the secondary research is exactly what it says, it's research into existing research about the topics that I was looking into. For my F&P, I decided to look into art education within the UK, budget cuts towards art, the privatisation of creative subjects and creative careers, as this is the issue my protagonist is facing. She wants to become an artist and she's passionate about it, however there is no financial security in it and she's really struggling because she hasn't had that opportunity to make her stand within the career and within the sector. She was never put on that path through education. She could not afford to go to an art school, she could not afford art classes. She's just a working class girl who has a passion and wants to make a career out of it, however all odds are against her. I used these side comments to talk about some of the main findings that I found within the secondary research, as we can see here, and I use this technique further down throughout the research report. I find it much more useful than, say, writing beneath the research, as I feel like it's a quick, easy and visually pleasing way for me to understand my own research and also for my teachers or tutors to look back at the work I've done and the findings that I have taken from this. Here we can see I did it a lot as I talk about the restriction of students partaking in popular courses, and this stage of the research was essential to my production, as previous to this I had an idea of the issues within society currently surrounding this topic. However, I had not been able to prove or back up my point. Now with this research I was able to make my short film knowing that I was targeting an important issue that is current within society and that is relatable and there is proof behind it. I then went on to my target audience research, which I touch on in my pitch presentation also. This is very brief, just to look at the social demographic scale and the age group of people that I would be targeting. Here we can see that it's 16 to 26 year olds from the C2 to E category, as these are the people who are students and working class people who cannot afford the artistic education. This is really the first main link between two research stages. I got the majority of this research from my primary research responses when I put out the surveys. The majority of people who answered the surveys were from this demographic, showing me that they were the people who related most to my film. I then looked into demographics and audiences for big production companies such as the BBC and E4 and Vice and YouTube. Here I looked at their commissioning process and just the audience, the target audience they have for different types of media, whether it was journalism, documentaries, films, television. This was really useful for me as it showed me how to target certain audiences and the best way of doing that. This was also useful as it showed me that E4 had the most similar target audience to mine, as I say here, which makes this really useful as I can now go and look at E4 short films or E4 shows that surround similar topics to my own and know that they managed to reach the target audience that I am trying to reach. Here I look more into their demographics and so on, and once again come to inclusion, conclusion and evaluation of the research I found. I then looked into trend surveys and statistics. For this I looked into Google Trends, comparing the term art as a field of study to artist as a general topic, and we can see that over the past 10 years there has been an increasing decline in the search of both of these, an interest in art as a field of study and artist as a topic. Comparing this to the secondary research of budget cuts over the past 10 years, it's undoubtable that the cut to artistic education has led to the disinterest of it as a career. Here I looked into script research for this. I looked into A Star is Born, a movie that was a major inspiration for me when creating this project, as it is about Ali, a working class girl who becomes the star she's always dreamed of and the struggle she faces. By looking at a professional script, it has shown me how to format a script and also the best way to combat a script with minimal dialogue, as this film starts off with very little dialogue at the beginning and it is heavily focused on the visuals and the music, which is similar to my own, as I have a lack of dialogue within my film and a heavy emphasis on the visuals of the art and the music that plays in the background. Here I talk about how my script will also heavily focus on directions and the parenthetical aspects of the script and storyline rather than the dialogue. This is where I found out about Yumi Script and where I started drafting the script that I showed previously. After looking at multiple script formatting services and also trying to format a script myself, I found that this one was the best and it was the most similar to the script that I previously looked at for my script research. I then had a mini evaluation of this using SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity and threat again. I have a separate evaluation folder which looks over each section in more detail, which I'll go into later. This stage, the visual research stage, was the most useful for me and it was the most relevant in my eyes, as this whole production is about art and the visual aspects of film and showing the passion of art and creativity visually and really displaying the emotions people have. Here I did my mood board, which here you can see the parts that are annotated to show the link between the mood board and the storyline of the production. So for example, colourful art will show her passion and the passion art brings her. My film will be colourful and colour graded. The dark abstract painting as seen here comes into play at the end of the film, hence the lack of contrast in the final scene. This is what I really was able to play around with the visual aspects of the movie and talk more about cinematography. The most interesting and unique part of my film is certainly the typography and layout design. As my film includes subtitles, I did a lot of typography research into this to find the best style of font of typography. I looked at forums and different reports and different examples of how fonts are used, and I found that Helvetica in Simpson Yellow was the best style of typography, as it gives off the indie film vibe and also is a great contrast to most visuals on screen, so it's easier to see. Looking down at the layout of my film is one of the very few films I have seen that uses this aspect ratio. The typical one is the 16:9, 19:20, 10:80 ratio. However, mine has the black box all the way around. It's still the same aspect, however, it is shrunken down, so it is giving this sort of home video, old 90s square TV vibe to it. I went for this because I like to play around and experiment with my film, and I feel like if you're creating a film, you should always try to make yours unique, and I am really happy with the way mine turned out. I feel like it gives the film a very continental vibe, a very unique and artistic approach. It complements my artistic approach to the film and my protagonist Alice's artistic approach to life, and I think it is really fitting. If my storyline was different, I don't think this aspect ratio would have worked, but because of what my film is about, I feel like this was one of my bravest choices and one of my most successful. I then looked at work from influential directors and also similar products. Here I just touched on, the inspirations I got from each of these, and I spoke about this a lot in my pitch example as I briefly highlighted the films that would be a massive inspiration to me. However, the most important one here is definitely Black Swan. The reason for this is because Black Swan is what motivated me to make the most controversial decision while making my film, which is the use of shaky footage to display emotion. And I'm not talking about like just light shaking, I'm talking about extremely shaky, distracting, abstract shots which are used within the film Black Swan to show her intense emotion toward her dance, and it really connects the audience to her emotional experience and allows the audience to put themselves in the main character's position subconsciously. I chose to replicate this with my own production at the very end when my protagonist is at her most confused and dark and upset about the decision she was forced to make to give up her passion for art for financial security. I also showed this using a lack of contrast and saturation within the cinematography, and overall I feel like it was extremely successful. For my audience feedback, it was also deemed successful. I had no complaints about it. However, I can see why some people may not like it. I will show the difference quickly if I need this. Here we can see when the film starts, the cinematography is very bright. Open this up. The cinematography is bright, the colours are bright, there's a nice use of manual focus. We can see the aspect ratio that I was talking about with the black bars around, and I'm happy with it. Now, obviously the watching experience is different with the music on, however, we can see here, after she is forced to make the decision that she does not want, there becomes a lack of colour and everything gets very dark and very shaky and very intense. This paired along with the music that is in this production makes this final scene seem very confusing and sad, and as if we don't know what's about to happen. I then continued my research and looked into abstract paintings. As we just saw, the final painting that my artist creates is a black and white abstract piece which she painted herself, and I looked into different connotations of black and white abstract art and different versions which were inspirations to me. I then also did many experiments and workshops, which you can see on my website later, but a few were included here. As example, my test shots and how I practice my manual focus, which is used a lot in my production, my online tutorials for on-screen text messages, and my own example of how I did that. I decided to change it into a sort of Sherlock Holmes approach after my rough edit, as I thought it fit my production well, and after feedback from Sonia, she also agreed that I should go with this style rather than the iPhone text bubble. Here we look more into experiments with audio and camcorder settings. This was very useful for me, as in the final scene where there is a lack of saturation and I wanted to make the scene darker, I decided to play around with the iris and shutter speed also when doing some of the close-up shots to include more detail. Of course, I analyse each and then I do my evaluation. Here I went more into budgeting research, which I touched on in my pitch, and I also included BEC2 rates, which are the standard recommended minimum going rate within the industry. So I knew when creating my budget template, which we can see here, the exact amount of money my short film would cost to make. Then there's some brief research into my pre-production and production. Here we see the location recce, risk assessment and call sheet that I will have to have completed at this stage. I didn't include much as I have a lot of experience with production paperwork from other projects. Then post-production, my location release form, my contributor agreement, which is my actor, and my evaluation of that. Then we got on to feedback. This is feedback for the rough edit and what is told me, the changes I can make, and then after making those changes, the final edit and the overall feedback for that. I then spoke about how happy I am with the response, my contributor feedback, which is in the feedback folder, which is a short conversation between me and my actress on how we believe the overall film went, and the competitions that I will be entering my film into. Here we can see my final conclusion of the context and research evaluation, which is detailed. I talk about each stage and how I feel the research went and how it helped me. I believe I achieved all the goals documented, which are detailed above, and I was really happy with my research report. This was such a help in creating my project, as I said, from the visual research, which helped me drastically with my approach to the film, and also the secondary research and primary research, which helped me know more about my audience and the route I wanted to take in showing the social, demographic and historical issues surrounding the film. Then obviously we have my bibliography down here. After this we had the problem solving log, which is a simple document but extremely useful, as I had many issues with my actress that I had to log within my problem solving log. I used this document throughout my project anytime an issue occurred. For example, if I had forgotten my SD card and I didn't know what to do, I referred back to the problem solving log that I made for help. So here we can see theoretical issue I may have is running out of storage on my SD card. What I would do to make sure I don't, take a backup one, also have a hard drive to store it on in case I need to delete any footage. And this is useful as before going off and shooting, I looked at this to make sure none of these issues could occur. Then we got into actual issues that I face. Here we can see my location for the shoot had fallen through, so I had to find new ones, and mainly my actress let me down multiple times, so I had to change her. And this just goes on to talk about how I overcame my issues, which I also reflect on in my reflective journal. I feel like these two go together very well, and complement each other. Where I may have missed out a problem within the problem solving log, I may have touched on it a lot more in the reflective journal. Next, after this, we see planning and production, where we have test shots, which I already showed in my research report, audio, auditions, which I have shown, my script, and my production paperwork, experiments, and my evaluation of this stage. As I said, the experiments are shown a lot on my FNP website and within my research report, as we saw previously. Here we can see a lot of workshops that I did to help me practice filming for this. If we go to my paperwork, here we can see audio workshops that I've done, my budgeting, which I already spoke about, my call sheet, which detailed information for my casting crew so they knew where to get to for the shoot, my shot list, which was a very important part of this production. Here we can see I include the shoot day schedule, the shots that we will be needing to film within that day, and which cast and crew references would need to be on set. The shot list I completed after I finished my script, and it is just a list of shots that I plan on taking. This helped me visualise my project alongside the research I completed, so I knew what style of shot I would like to take, and it really helped me make sure that my film was diverse in its approach, and I included key filmmaking styles such as the 5-shot rule, manual focus, establishing shots, and so forth. The risk assessment for this project was quite vague, but this is because there was not many risks present in the location that I ended up with. However, I tried to fill it out to the best of my ability to highlight all of the possible risks and how to combat them. Here we can see I just go into detail about how I will avoid these risks, and I've signed it. This folder overall I'm extremely pleased with. I probably have the most experience completing production paperwork, so this was very easy for me, but still I spent a lot of time making sure it was to a great standard for this FNP, as I aim to do all of my work to a high standard, and I wanted the best for my final production. And this paperwork, of course, came in extremely useful when it came to getting permission for locations, for my actor, and for understanding how my shoot was going to go. If we look more into the checklist, we can see that I had a filming checklist for production and also my production paperwork checklist, which we can see from here, I don't have to open it, is all filled out alongside my filming checklist. This just helped me stay on track alongside my schedule that I did at the beginning of the production, and really kept me focused on my work and prevented me from potential mistakes that I could have made. Go back into the FNP folder. You can see that next is the production shoot. As I just showed you that the checklist was there and filled out, I'm now going to just move on to talking about my rough and final edit and my evaluation of post-production. For my editing, I used Premiere Pro and After Effects rather than Final Cut, as this is the software I have at home, and I did the majority of my edit over half term. If I go here, we can see my production evaluation and my post-production evaluation. While those load, I will talk about this folder. In this folder, I go into each stage in incredible depth and evaluate how it went, how I was successful in some parts and unsuccessful in others, some of the mistakes I made, some of my best decisions, and of course did a SWOT analysis for all of them, the context, primary, production, secondary, post-production, pre-production, visual research, and my final evaluation, which is the most in-depth. It is 5 pages long. I'll show it at the end of this presentation, which talks about all of these stages in one final overall conclusion. Here we can see my post-production evaluation, where I spoke about my edit and the difficulty that I faced. At times my laptop crashed, causing me to have to reboot my edit and find missing footage and try again. However, I never gave up. And overall, I was happy with the post-production. I was happy with how my edit went. Here we can see how I said it was initially smooth and at times it got a bit shaky. However, I managed to get through that while creating my rough draft. I then showed my rough drafts to some people, a small group of my target audience, and also Sonia, who was the biggest help at this stage for me. She sat down with me and really spoke about how I could improve my film. What I was not expecting, however, was her telling me to change the ending of my film completely, which stressed me out a little bit. However, I took her advice and called in my actress again. She was very helpful and was able to come, and we changed the ending, and after changing it I can see why she told me to. I feel like my production is a lot stronger now with the ending that I showed. Previously to that, she had taken the job and it finished. We don't see her painting and then having that highly intense moment at the end of the film where she's staring at her painting and you can see that she has lost her passion. I also talk about my feedback. One thing that I would really have liked to change was that I didn't get any focus group feedback. However, oftentimes in focus groups people don't speak their mind and they copy what other people say. So I don't think this was detrimental to my project by not having it. However, it would have been nice to have some footage of people's reactions to my work, as oftentimes you can tell what people are thinking by looking at them, and with written work and feedback, while it may be honest, it is also quite repetitive from most people. Overall, I talk about how the post-production stage was one of the most challenging and how I was happy with my overall outcome of this stage. I also go into my SWOT analysis there. And my production, this is obviously, I'm not going to read all of this, but I just talk about how I used my skills and the skills that came in handy, such as, my experience with manual focus and shooting throughout the last 2 years on this course. I talk about how my actress let me down constantly and I had to change it last minute, which was a massive stress. However, I had previously planned, as you can see in my research report, a backup actress in case this happened, which was one of my most successful decisions, as of course I had to end up using her. If I hadn't done this research, I probably would have at this stage really stressed and struggled to find a new actress, and this could have been detrimental to the outcome of my FMP. I just went through my evaluation. Now we can look at my reflective journal. here in this folder is my footage, which briefly links to the production. I have my audio, which is all the audio and sound effects I use that I copyright free 100%. I made sure to check for my production, the sound effects, soundtrack, and some of the dialogue I had recorded. And of course here there's just a few pieces of test shots, like one test shot and then all the shots I took. Of course there was not enough room on the drive for me to upload all of my footage. My reflective journal folder, here we can see I have my image and screenshots which go into the reflective journal. Some I just put straight in rather than uploading. Guidelines for my reflective journal, which I followed throughout my reflective journal to ensure that it was as reflective, as detailed, as evaluative as possible. I have been doing reflective journal since the beginning of the course, so for me, I knew what to do. It was just a matter of keeping my work precise and not rambling about what I did, but rather how what I did improved my project. Here I talk about the horror challenge that I did at the very beginning as a way to practice all of my skills before actually completing the project. I have to leave it to load, but in the meanwhile we can go and look at my website. The link to my website is in the beginning of the folder. This is the home page where I just talk about, you know, the work that people see in here, some of my photography, and obviously all of my first year work, the workshops I did this year, which include the experiments I did for my F&P, 30-second narrative, creative conscience, contact gallery, and my F&P. Now if you click on F&P, it takes you to my final edit, which I will show you. Then we have a presentation, which is where this video will go alongside my pitch presentation, which I have not yet been able to upload as it is quite long, and so is this, so I need to find a way of getting around that. I may have to edit this down or put it up as 2 separate videos on YouTube and then link it through. And of course my rough edit. For my rough edit, I just have the video. I'm going to include some of the feedback that you saw my rough edit on this page, as I'm still editing my Wix and my reflective journal. Today's final day, so I'm just working on that, trying to get it precise and perfect before I finalise anything. However, I wanted to get this video done beforehand because it is a long video and I really wanted to be able to sit down and go through detail on my whole project. Here we have my F&P final page, which has the title, Le Vedard, the short film with the title, and here we have the brief description of my film. I'm also going to include on this page some of the visual research I did for the film and a link to my research report. Of course, this website would look way better by the end of the day once everything has been uploaded. I'm really proud of how my website looks, and I will ensure that it looks as professional as possible and shows all of the work that I have done for this F&P. My reflective journal, as I was saying, it continues using the guidelines that I showed within the folder throughout. What happened, what knowledge was used, in fact there's a better version of this. What happened, what have I learned, how can I use a new learning, what went wrong, what action did I take to resolve the issue, light bulb moment, evaluation of SWOT. I did this after every single piece of project. It shows my strengths, my weaknesses, opportunities, and also threats. Stretch and challenge if there is one, and the 3 targets. I did this throughout my production and I'm really pleased with my reflective journal. I believe that this is the best my reflective journal has ever been. I did, when completing this, look back at last year's F&P reflective journal, which I did receive a distinction for, and when comparing it to the work that I've done now, I am certain that this reflective journal is strong, and if not stronger than the one I did last year, definitely the same grade or worthy of, as I didn't make the mistake of just talking about what I did, but I rather used the reflective journal to actually help me develop my project and reflect on the development I had done. Without this reflective journal, there would have been times where I was stuck doing the same thing. Often I would come and reflect on what I did in the day and realise that I hadn't learnt anything, and at that point, because of the reflective journal, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do that again tomorrow. I did this piece of work today, I learned nothing from it, therefore it's not necessary and I don't need to waste my time on it. I can move on to something that's actually going to help me develop my project, rather than something that's just there for the sake of it being there, such as certain parts of the research project. I continued this at the beginning of my concept and context research. I just went through each stage, and then when it got to the research report, I decided to you can see that I just went really into detail with all of the work that I've done here. This is some of my most reflective work where I looked back. As you can see here, I said go back onto my proposal, so I wasn't too sure if it was strong enough, and I looked back on it and decided, you know what, some of this needs rewording, and I did that and compared it to the criteria and definitely made it match the criteria for a distinction. By doing this, by comparing my work, I was able to ensure I got the grade I needed, and I used this technique throughout my reflective journal. Now, as I said, I'm still adding to my reflective journal. I've done most of the writing, however, it needs a lot more of the screenshots and visual aspects, but by the end of the day that will all be done, all be completed. Here you can see I have my context evaluation, which needs screenshots and whatnot, and then I have a SWOT analysis, and then I have the research report, which spanned for a long time, over a month, and I just talk about each stage, and I talk about here, rather than doing a SWOT analysis for each stage, I didn't want to get too repetitive as what I've done in the research report, so I decided to highlight what I learnt in yellow, the response and outcome in pink, what I would have changed in red, and successful decisions in green. This was a great way for me to look back on my reflections and look back on my work and see just how relevant it was and how it helped me develop my project. This continues. And then, of course, I talk about making my production work, my animatic, and then I move on to production and other stages of this project. And like I said, it's not finished. I still need to add in my final conclusion and my screenshots and my evaluations and reflections on the production process, which I have started but have not yet finished. If we go here and we can look at the final evaluation, as I said before, something similar to this will be written at the bottom of my reflective journal. I'm still going into that and still writing it, but it will be done by the end of the day. Here we can see, now that my project is complete, I can look back on each stage of work and reflect on how it was completed. When doing so, I can see how some of the choices I made were not the best, such as using Mandy to find my actors, and how other were crucial to the success of my project, such as having that backup actress in case of an issue occurring. Here I go into detail, extreme detail, about every single decision I made within this project and how strong it was and how weak it was at times and how it really created the experience of how my project went and how I've learned from making bad decisions and making successful decisions, and what it's taught me about the film industry as a whole. At the very end, I say, in conclusion, I'm extremely happy with the short film I produced. Although at some stages there were setbacks, I believe and I've been told that I managed this project well, and that the final short film is a clear representation of my initial aim and goal within this project. Looking back on the project now that it is finished, there are a few things that I would change at each stage of the project. However, none of these were detrimental to the outcome, mainly just adding in more detail to certain documents or pieces of research. See, this is why it's always important. I am to proofread. Please that the audience feedback on my videos so positive, and that the overall consensus was that my film was successful in promoting the idea that the idea that art and art education must be taken more seriously within the UK and be paid more attention to. I took risks while making this film, which luckily paid off. Although it's not a typical piece of cinema, it is unique and specialised to the purpose and message I was trying to promote. Of course, I am going to proofread and spell check and grammar check everything, as you can see just then. I still need to finish some of the work. However, my project is completed and I am pleased with it how it is. There are a few things that I need to adapt before the end of the day, but overall, this F&P project has been by far the strongest, most professional, most developed project I've completed over the past 2 years on this course, and I am pleased with how it turned out. And to leave